Today is December 6, 2023. We are interviewing Frida Langness. My name is Esther Finder. Ms. Langness is in West Bloomfield, Michigan. I am in Henderson, Nevada in the United States, and the language will be English. Thank you for speaking with us today. What is your name and can you please spell it?
Frida Langness. Frida, F-R-I-E-D-A, Langness, L-A-N-G-N-A-S.
What was your name at birth?
Frida Zalc, Z-A-L-C.
Where were you born?
I was born in Danzig, Gdansk. It was called.
In what country?
It was a free state at that time, but now it's part of Poland.
And when were you born?
I was born July 23rd, 1935.
And forgive me, but I have to ask, how old are you today?
88.
How long had your family lived in Danzig? Were they there many generations?
No, my parents were born in Blaszka, a small shtetl in Poland, and they came to Danzig when they were in probably their 20s or their late teens, you know, and they lived with a brother and sister that were married. My parents, my mother's brother married my father's sister. So that's where they both went when they came from Blaszka to Danzig. And they were there, you know, maybe 4 or 5 years before they married. And then my father married my mother, who was also at my aunt and uncle's house. And then when they married, my father had a small store, and he needed somebody to stay in the stores. So my mother used to stay in the store and work while my father went around getting customers. But it was very small.
Do you know why your parents moved from the little shtetl or whatever in Poland to Danzig? What made them move?
Well, I think my father, I'm not sure really 100%, but I think they just wanted a better life. My aunt and uncle were in Danzig. They were married. And my father left when he was a teenager, and he went and stayed and started working in Danzig. And then my mother came, I think, when my aunt and uncle had us a child, and she was maybe a nanny for him, you know, helped out. So my father wasn't so poor in Blaszka, but my mother came from a big family of 8 brothers and sisters. Her family was like Hasidim. They were very, very Orthodox, and she was very, very poor. My father came from a more modern Orthodox family, and he said he wasn't poor, but he just wanted to go and be independent.
Can you tell us a little bit about what Danzig was like in those days?
Well, it was
Were there a lot of Jews? I'm sorry.
Were there a lot of Jews? I think there were, well, it was a small city. It was like 1,000,000 people, I think my father said. And there were some Jews there, but they were not very observant people. So during that time, even though they had come from Orthodox families, they were living a different life then. And so I'm not sure how many Jews there were, but there were probably quite a few, because they had synagogues there, and it was a city. It was a city off the sea, the Baltic Sea, and it was a port city, and they loved their life there.
What was your father's name?
Harry Zalk, Z-A-L-C, was Herschel Labe. And, you know, then when he came to America, he changed it. He called himself Harry.
You mentioned he had a store, but you didn't tell us what kind of store.
Oh, it was like a dry goods store. He sold like, well, he had a small store originally with my mother, and he had a bedroom there and a kitchen. But then when he could afford it, he bought a larger store, and then he and my mother both worked in the store. And they had like yard goods. They sold needlepoint things or embroidery pieces, because he had a man that came to the store and used to do the print on the piece of material. So they had different things like tablecloths or doilies or runners. And like twice a year, he used to go to Lodz, Poland, to buy his merchandise. And he used to take a train there and go there and then bring the merchandise back for the store. And it was a very successful store, he said.
What was your mother's name?
My mother's name was Sarah Zelk.
Did you have any brothers or sisters?
I did, but they were born after we came to America. I was the only child like until I was like 6.5 years old. My mother's maiden name was Jakubowicz, was Sarah Jakubowicz.
What are some of your very earliest memories from your childhood?
Well, all the things that I don't really have memories of Danzig because I was 3.5 when I left there. But I listened to my father's recordings, that we had of him, and he said he loved his life there, and then, but well, do you want me to tell the story now of how they lived in Danzig, and how the Germans came in and all the things that happened? Okay, so he said like in 1933 things started changing for him in Danzig. But then by 1935, he said whenever he got money from in the store, he used to take it and to the for somewhere to get American dollars from the black market. And then he used to, he opened an account in a Polish bank, and he used to put his money through the Polish bank. But he opened different accounts. Like when people were leaving Danzig, he used to give them money to open an account like in England, and some people opened one for him in America, and other people opened one in Palestine. So he was getting ready. He knew that his time was limited there, and he was getting ready, but he had no place to go. He couldn't leave there with no place to go. And but so he continued his life there, and he loved his life. And my mother worked in the store, and then I was born in 1935. And when I was born, they hired a nanny to take care of me. And so my mother, continued working in the store. And but 35 things started getting worse, you know, for the Jews there. And then but there were children in the building, and I used to play with them, and my father associated with a lot of different people. He says, but as time went on, he couldn't associate with them anymore because they were all all the non-Jews were obligated to join the Nazi party. Some of them became SS men, and some of them just became regular soldiers, I guess. And so he lost all these people, and they could no longer associate with him. And then there was a little girl, I guess, in the building that used to be my age, and we'd play together. But then the father came over one day and said that I could no longer play with this child because Jews couldn't, Aryan people could not play with Jewish children. Then there was like Kristallnacht came in 1938, November of 38. And my father's store was destroyed. The windows were broken. It was padlocked. He wasn't allowed to go in there. He couldn't do anything there with them anymore. So in January, they went to the consulate to try to find a place where they could leave to go. But what happened was that no one wanted to take them because they were like people without a state, because the Poles had taken my father's passport away, and nobody wanted the Germans, and he couldn't get a German passport because he was a Jew. So anyway, what happened is that my father went to the English consulate, and they wouldn't take him, and Americans wouldn't take him. So, but from a friend of his, he found out that there was a man in Trinidad that had a factory, and he was willing to sponsor people to leave Danzig because he was Jewish, and he would take. So my father, mother, they went to Hayes, I think it was, and to find out what they knew about Trinidad. And there they didn't give them a very good review of it, but my mother said that she would rather go there than stay in Germany. So, yes. I can't hear you.
I'm sorry. I do have one or two questions. Do you happen to know the name of the man who would accept Jewish people to come to Trinidad?
No, I'm sorry, I don't.
That's okay. And you said that starting in around 35, things started to get bad for your family.
Right.
Who was making it difficult? The Nazis were not there yet, were they?
Well, they must have been if people were joining the SS, and they must have been.
Yeah, I'm just wondering if they were Volksdeutsch or if they were. Were they local citizens?
Well, Danzig was a German in a Polish state, so the Germans were there. They were becoming all part of the Nazi party, and so anyway, and one day my father was coming home, and then there were gangs of Nazi boys started chasing him. and he was passing a movie theater, so he knew the people that owned the movie theater because they were customers of his in the store, and he said, "Let me buy a ticket and go in the theater, so so they won't beat me up." So they let him. They didn't want him to buy a ticket, but they let him go in the theater and hide until they didn't let the Nazi boys come in the theater. And then after that, then when my father was leaving, they said, "Well, we let you in here once, but we're not going to let you in again." So, but then he got home safely, but that scared him a lot. And he said they were always putting Jewish stars on their buildings and breaking glass, and life was getting very difficult for them there. And people were not allowed to associate with them anymore. But then, so my father got a visa to go to Trinidad. And the man sponsored him, and he took a train from Danzig to Bordeaux, and then he got on the boat Flanders, and he went in the lowest level of the boat. That's the only ticket he could get to get on the ship. And he went to Trinidad, but when he arrived, the man said to him in Trinidad, the factory owner, he said, "Well, when you're here," he says, "don't speak to me in Yiddish or German because my wife thinks I'm Polish," and he didn't want her to know he was Jewish anyway. And then he said the first day he got to Trinidad, there was a street fair, where you could buy food and things, and he bought a coconut, but he didn't know what to do with it. So he walked around with it all day. But I think he said Hayes helped him get a room there in a house. And so he was okay. And then my mother and I, we came like 3 weeks later because my father wanted to go and try to see what he could do for business or make a living and settle there. And but when my mother and I and another woman were on the ship, that the husbands were on the island of Trinidad, they didn't want to let them off. But the Trinidad didn't want to let them on the island. But somehow, either my father bribed the people in Trinidad, or because the husbands were on the island, they let my mother and I and this other lady off the ship to be with their husbands. And in Trinidad, we lived there for like 18 months. And we had a nice life there. I went to a private school. I took dancing lessons. We went to the park. My father said there were like 100 German Jews there and 100 Romanian Jews there. And there were like 6 families of Sephardic Jews that were settlers there, that lived there. And they tried, when the immigrants came, the refugees, these Sephardic Jews helped them as much as they could. And I think Hayes helped them also.
I wanted to ask you to think back about leaving Europe, and I had a few questions. Did you say goodbye to family and friends or anything like that? Do you remember leaving?
Well, I don't remember because I was 3 and a half, but we had no family there because my aunt and uncle had already left in the summer of 37, and they settled in Detroit. So, and the friends, I guess maybe there were a few friends, but a lot of people just you couldn't associate with anymore. But you could. My parents said they couldn't take anything. They couldn't sell the store. They couldn't sell any of the merchandise in the store, but they could take their personal belongings, like their dishes or pots and pans, their bedding. They could take that, and they brought it in these large wicker baskets. They're just gigantic baskets. And that's how they shipped them, abroad. But I don't think there were many people that they could say goodbye to anymore there, because they weren't allowed to associate with many.
When did you leave Europe?
Well, we left in January 39. We left Danzig. And then we were in Trinidad until like August of 40. We lived in Trinidad for 18 months, but then, and it was an English island. But then England went to war with Germany, and so they wanted to put all the German refugees that were on the island of Trinidad like in a holding camp, like we did to the Japanese here. So, but my dad didn't really want to go in a camp. And he went to the consulate, I guess, in Trinidad, and he asked if if the quota was filled to come to America. And they said no, he could come. There was room, and there was a distant relative in New York that sponsored us. And so my mother wanted to leave immediately. She said, okay, let's go the next day. And they came, they had to go, the only way they could get there, they had to go on a cruise ship, on the SS Argentina. And they had to go first class. They used to have classes on those cruise ships, I guess. So they had to go first class on the cruise ship. And they went through Ellis Island. But yes.
Before I have you leaving Trinidad, most people don't know that any Jews went to Trinidad. Can you share with us a little bit about what you remember of life there? How were you treated by the locals? How did your family support itself? Anything that you can remember. I know you were young.
Well, we had a nice life there. It was very hot and tropical, weather, but I went to a private school. They started school when they were 4 years old there. And I learned to read and write there. I went to dancing school, I took ballet or tap, And then my father told me that, and then at the end of the year, they'd have a recital, and they do it in front of the governor of the island. But because I was a German refugee, they had to get me clearance that I wasn't a danger to the whatever. But anyway, so that we had our recital, and we went to parks, and my father, I guess he was a peddler of clothes, or he had a stall somewhere, but he never, I don't think he opened a store. And he said he had a hard time getting merchandise there to sell. But we were okay. But when we left, he had some money in the bank and that he had put away before they left Danzig. There was money in the English banks, but they said because of the war, he couldn't take it all out because they couldn't afford to give it to him. It wasn't so much money, but so they used to send him a check every month of like 100 and some dollars until all the money was gone. When he got to America, that happened.
I realize you were young, but did you experience any anti-Semitism or witness any anti-Semitism in Trinidad?
Not that I know of. My parents never spoke of it either.
Is there anything else about your life there that you'd like to share, like where you lived, who your friends were, any memories?
No, I don't really have memories of, because I was 5 years old when I left there. So, but I think we had a nice life there. And my father said that there were all the Germans, that refugees came, and there were some doctors in the German group, but they couldn't practice medicine because they didn't recognize their medical degree. But among the Romanians, there was a doctor that had gone to medical school in Italy, and they recognized his diploma and his license. So he was able to practice medicine, and but when he came from Romania, he had a bag of pills, and my father said that no matter what was wrong with you, you got the same pill. And then you were supposed to check into the governor every day, and so if you didn't go, he would write a letter for you saying that you were sick that day. So they, you know, but they were happy to leave.
Did you have any expectations of America, or do you remember your first impressions of the United States?
Well, I just remember being in a car in New York after we got out of Ellis Island. I guess it made me car sick, and I got sick in the car. And then I remember when we got to Detroit, we must have come right away to Detroit because my aunt and uncle lived here, and Highest put us up in a room in somebody's house that had a child that was my age. So we lived there for a little while. And then my uncle had a store in Detroit, and his store, and then he became partners with my dad and helped him open a store on State Fair in Detroit. And he opened like a Kmart, not a Kmart, but a Kresge or something, like a dime store. And he opened the store, and when he first opened the store, it was my mother and father and myself. And we used to live in the back of the store, and we only had a bathroom with a toilet and a sink, and we had a little hot plate that my mother cooked on. Like there was no shower. We just lived there until my parents could afford. We moved, and we didn't have a car either. My father didn't even know how to drive. And we lived down the street. We moved down the street to an upper flat and lived there for a few years. And then my mother became pregnant with my brother and sister, who are twins, and they were born a year after we came to America. And but then, we lived in this upper flat, and when the Jewish agency sent my mother a helper to help her because she had these twins, and she had nobody to help her at all. And she had me too. So I was like 6 years old when they were born. But my father's store was right on the corner down the block from where we lived. So she could walk there. We could all walk there. And we lived there for a few years until they could afford, and they bought a house across the street from this upper flat. And it was a little tiny house. It had, on the main floor was just a living room, dining room, a kitchen. Upstairs were 2 bedrooms and a bathroom. And then when the first few years when we lived there, they even was during the war, so they took in a boarder, a woman. I think she was a teacher, and she rented a room, and well, maybe there were 3 bedrooms because I stayed in a room with my sister and brother. My parents had a room, and she had the other room.
You mentioned several times that HIAS helped you.
Yeah.
Can you tell us who or what is HIAS?
It's I don't know the words exactly, but they help Jewish people around the world. You know, it's I don't know the exact name of it.
How were you treated by your American neighbors when you arrived?
They were okay to me. You know, we were the only Jewish people living in that area, and I went to Marshall School, and I never knew another Jewish person there either.
Did you experience or witness any anti-foreign or anti-Semitic sentiments when you first got there in your early
Oh,
years?
yes. When I first got there, I went to kindergarten, okay? I started kindergarten, and we used to walk to school. And I, I was always late. My mother brought me somehow late. So he used to put me in the corner. So fine. And then I was wearing brown high top shoes. I wasn't dressed like an American, wearing different kind of odd clothes, but then we got that figured out. And it was just funny. And I knew how to read because I'd gone to school in Trinidad, but the other children, nobody knew how to read. It was so, but then everybody caught up, you know, and it was good. But there were no other Jewish people there where we lived.
Who did your parents socialize with?
Well, they didn't socialize during those years because they were busy working. They had no car, and they had 3 little children. So they weren't exactly so. They worked 6 days a week, and you know, and they had my aunt and uncle. They lived on the west side of town, and so they used to come over on Sundays and visit us, and that was their social life pretty much, you know, during those early years. And so, you know, they were hard years, but they were okay. They were fine. But you know, my parents were always very sad because they knew that things were so bad in Europe and their families were being exterminated, and it was a very sad time for them.
Were your parents able to stay in touch with family and friends back in Europe for any period of time after they left?
Um, I think they stayed in touch with one cousin. One was my father's nephew, sister's son, who hadn't wanted to immigrate with my aunt and uncle when they did. He wanted to go to Israel, with Palestine at the time, but he ended up being killed because, you know, and my mother, every member of their family was exterminated. my mother's 8 brothers and sisters, my father's and their parents, both sets of parents, and any any family member left was exterminated. So we lost our whole family.
What do you remember of their process of learning what happened to family members?
Well, it was very sad. They used to read. They used to. There were lists of family members in the newspaper, or sometimes the Red Cross would put out lists of people, and they used to go. I don't know if it was the Jewish Center or someplace, and read the list to see if any of their family members were on the, still alive. But they never found any. And then, but I'll tell you, something funny happened. My dad, after the war, he was able to buy a car. He bought a Mercury, I think. But he didn't know how to drive, so he had to have a young man, an American neighbor that lived there, used to come every night and take him for a ride to teach him how to drive. And one day he came home and he said he had the most wonderful drink he never had before. The young man took him to get a milkshake, and he thought that was amazing. But it was good, yeah.
I have a question for you about the war years.
Yes.
When you were in this country. In what ways do you think you and your family viewed the war differently than your American-born classmates or friends? Were you aware of differences in how your family perceived the war in Europe?
Well, the war was way more personal to us than it was to the general population, because we came from there, and that was why we were lucky enough to come to America, but we knew all our family was being killed. So, and then the thing about, I want to tell you that when I got old enough, maybe I was 8 or 9, my parents sent me to camp. There was a Jewish camp, Camp Tamarack. It was called Fresh Air Society. And that was like my first experience with Jewish people, Jewish children, having Shabbat. Like it was, it was a very lovely experience.
What else stands out in your memory of your life, you with your family, during the war while you were in the United States? Is there anything else that you remember? Anything that you were deprived of, or anything you had to sacrifice? Anything like that at all that you can remember from your childhood?
Well, it was just, a difficult time because my parents were always working, and my brother and sister were little, and we had no car. Well, everybody had a difficult time, though. It wasn't just us, because we had rations. We had to go, if you wanted butter or meat, you had to use a ration book for it. But then there were nice times too. You could play roller skate on the street. They used to freeze one of the empty lots on the street. You learned how to ice skate. We used to take a bus. On Sunday, my dad would take the 3 of us on a bus. We'd take the whole bus route. So we had something to do while my mother was home baking or cooking or doing whatever she was doing. So that's what we used to do on Sundays, because we had no car.
You mentioned that your parents used to look at lists of survivors, try to find family members. Did anybody ever look to see fates of individual people? Did they ever learn what happened to this one, that one, or another relative? Or they
Just
just
that one,
noticed it?
just the one cousin, the nephew. They learned about him, but otherwise, um, they didn't learn about the others.
How much education were you able to get in the United States?
Me? Oh, well, I graduated high school and I graduated from college, University of Michigan, Dearborn.
And what did you study?
Art history.
Did anybody in the United States ever ask you about your flight from Europe to the United States? Did anybody ask you, do you remember your parents ever telling friends or neighbors about how they got out?
Well, they used to talk about it a lot with my aunt and uncle, and my cousin. I had one cousin and one aunt and uncle, and the rest of our family was exterminated. So that's, they used to talk together with them, about everything. But they had no other relatives that they could relate to about their life, or, that was similar to them. Like they knew no other people from Danzig or Trinidad, so it was different.
I'd like to pause for just a minute and ask you to think back. Is there anything else that you'd like to share with us about your life before the war, and being in Trinidad, and then also from the United States? Is there any memory that you want to share that you haven't told us about yet?
No, we were always thankful we were in America, and America was so good to us and saved our lives.
Have you ever been back to Europe?
I haven't been back to Danzig. No, we were going to go. My daughter was going to take me, but then COVID came about, so we had to cancel the trip, and we've never gone since.
You married and had a family. What did you tell your family about your childhood?
It was a good childhood. It was okay. I was lucky. I was just lucky to be here. And my husband was also a survivor. So we wanted to have a big family to try to make up for the loss of the ones that we had in Europe. So we had 4 children, and 2 older ones became doctors, 2 younger ones became lawyers. They all married, and then they each have 3 children. So I have 12 grandchildren and 2 great-grandchildren. So I'm lucky that way.
Could you tell us a little bit about your husband's survival?
Well, he survived. He was born in Vienna, and when he was 6 years old, his parents, he and his sister, they went to Italy because his father thought they could be safe in Italy. And he lived the whole war, he lived in Italy, traveling around from city to city. And thankfully, they all survived intact, the 4 of them. And then he was lucky enough that after the Americans invaded Italy and took it over, Ruth Gruber, President Roosevelt finally said that they could bring over 1,000 refugees. So his family was very fortunate to be brought to America in 1944 or 45. And they were brought to Oswego, New York. And they were put in a camp there for 18 months. And then, but they had to sign documents that they were willing to go back to Europe after the war. They were just here for respite and as guests of the United States. And Roosevelt would never change his mind and let them immigrant, but he died, and when Harry Truman became president, he allowed them to immigrate to America through uh, Canada. Yeah, so.
You mentioned Ruth Gruber by name. Can you tell us a little bit about her?
Well, she was an amazing woman. She worked for the State Department, and she was the person that they sent to Italy to pick the 1,000 refugees that they were bringing to America. And so she wrote a book called Haven, which my husband's story is in there. And she came to for the book fair one year when she wrote the book. She came to our house. We had dinner together. And she was an amazing person. She did such wonderful work. So, and she lived till 104, I think.
In what ways do you think your early experiences influenced your life and the choices you made?
Well, we were very family conscious, my husband and I. And we always were, we wanted our children to be well educated because we had no business or anything else to give them. And if you have an education, you can always be able to do something. So my husband was a physician. He was a pathologist. And so, that we were always my husband was well educated in Judaism. So I went along with whatever he said about it. And we raised, our family that way.
What religious traditions did your family follow when you were growing up?
My family, my parents were not religious at all, so I didn't have that much of a Jewish education. But my husband's family, his father he was almost Orthodox, and he wanted to make sure that, so my husband was a well-educated Jewish person. So when we got married, we kind of, whatever he said about, I did it. So we raised a Jewish family.
What is it like for you to be an American?
I think it's amazing. I love America. I'm so happy that I was able to come here, that the country saved my life. And I'm proud to be American.
How have the events since the attack in Israel on October 7th impacted you? How are you dealing with what's going on now?
Well, it's a difficult time in our lives, and we're praying for Israel. We're trying our best to do whatever we can to help them, to support them. And we hope it's over soon, and we hope the hostages are released soon.
What are your thoughts about the rise in anti-Semitism around the world and in the United States, especially on college campuses?
It's a very difficult time for college children, and I feel bad that they're suffering like this because of it. And I think we all have to stand up for our Jewish identity and be proud to be Jewish, and educate our children as much as we can so they understand where their heritage is coming from, and how to speak to anti-Semites about it. And that I think, being Jewish is like, and be proud and stand up for it, and also stay with your family, try to be close with them, and to try to get educated, make sure your children are educated.
Is there anything else that we haven't talked about that you'd like to add? Do you remember, for example, the birth of the State of Israel, or did you follow the Eichmann trial? Or any other memories that you
Well,
have? Do you want to share?
Yes, I do remember the birth of. I remember the end of the war. I remember the birth of Israel. Those are all important things that happened in our lives. There were
Please elaborate. What do you remember about the end of the war? What do you remember about the birth of the state?
Well, the end of the war, we walked around the area with pots and pans and making noise on it. So we were like cheering it.
And the birth of the state?
Yes, it was a really amazing time for us.
Is there anything we haven't covered that you'd like to still share with us?
No, I think I'm just fortunate that we survived the war. We were able to leave, and we thank God for that. And that I had a beautiful family.
What message do you have for
Well,
future viewers of this testimony?
well, that's what I think, just to stand up for your Jewish identity, be proud, and to stay with your family, and educate your children. Make sure they're educated so they can always have that with them.
I thank you for speaking with us today.
Thank you.
Rita, can you tell us who all these people are and introduce them?
Well, why would I let them introduce themselves and they can tell who they are? Okay, we can start over here with Michael.
I'm Michael Langness. I'm her third son. Behind me is my wife Lainey, and my daughter Leah, and my son Brian, and my one daughter Sarah. The oldest is in California and unable to be here.
Hi, I'm Susan, and I'm the youngest of the four. I'm the only daughter, and my husband is David Fieber, and this is my daughter Julia Fieber. She's also my youngest. I have two older sons who are, one is in college, his name's Harry, and one is in New York City working and going to graduate school, and his name is Max, and they wish they could be here today.
Okay, Lisa.
My name is Lisa, and I'm married to Gary, who is Frida's second son. And I have three daughters, and one of them is Jessica right here. And she is married to Gabe, who could not make it today. And she has two boys. One is Jack, and one is Charlie. And these are my grandchildren. And then I have a daughter, Emily, who could not make it today. And then I have a daughter, Natalie, and that's Natalie right there.
And then I have my oldest son lives in Nebraska, Omaha, Nebraska, and he has three children. Two live in Chicago, and one is in San Francisco.
What are their names?
And their names are Erica, and she's married to Zach, and they have a baby, Asher, and Rachel in Chicago, and Scott in Chicago. And also Emily, my granddaughter here, is married to Dima. But he couldn't be here either today.
Would anybody like to say anything to the star of our show, to Frida?
Okay.
Charlie, you want to
Charlie, would you like to say something?
Yes. So I'm Charlie, and my brother is Jack, and my favorite friend is Benny and Joe.
Charlie, do you want to say anything to Grandma Frida? Tell her how much you love her.
I love you so much, Grandma.
I love you so much too, Charlie. Charlie is my oldest great-grandson.
And you have 3 now.
Now I have 3, Charlie, Jack, and Asher.
Who's Asher?
You're going to say something,
We
Leo?
didn't meet him yet.
I was just saying that we love Grandma. Like, we all love Grandma.
Oh,
I know who Asher is. Azrael's little brother.
A different.
Julia, did you want to say
Charlie, let's
something?
give someone else a chance.
We love
All right,
Grandma.
does anybody else want to say anything?
You're just very special. I love you very much.
Thank you.
And we're thankful for everything you've done for us.
Oh, thank you.
We would do anything for her.
Okay.
We also
thank you.
wouldn't be here if it wasn't for Grandma. Like any of us.
And we just feel so lucky that we get to spend so much time with you, and you get to be such a big part of our lives. And we're really grateful.
Yeah, I think if
you.
you look up what a grandma is in the dictionary, you pretty much fit that perfectly and beyond.
Aw,
And we're
that's so
very lucky to share the big moments and the little moments with you.
Thank you. Thank you, everyone. Thank you for being here and always being so wonderful. I love you all.
We love you too.
I think that we're grateful that she finally had a chance to do this video. She's been reluctant. My mom has been reluctant to share her story because she always felt that she was very humble and felt that other people's stories were more worthwhile than hers. And over the years, we've helped her to see that her life story is very valuable to all of us and to the world. And it's whether she was 2 years old or 20 years old, what she had to experience leaving a country as a Jewish child without the freedom and safety and security that we know in America, that is just as important as someone who had to leave as an adult to survive. And we're just proud of her that she's been able to share her story with so many people and been able to give us a wonderful life.
Thank you.
I also think we're lucky to be able to hear it from her, especially like as older adults that can understand it. So now we're able to kind of keep her legacy and pass this story on for generations.
Thanks.
I think it would be nice if she shared her her message that she said to you on the video privately to her grandchildren of what she wanted what her final message was. I think it was really beautiful, and I think they might like to hear it also.
Well, okay. Well, to always be proud to be Jewish, stand up for your Jewish rights, and to be close with your family and get an education. So you always have that education with you.
I think Jack agrees.
Thank you, everybody.
Okay.
That was lovely.
Thank you.
Thank you,
you.
Esther.
What are we looking at here?
These books belong to my great-grandfather, my father's father, and they're from 1892, and they're prayer books, and we have a set of them that he brought from Europe.
And do you know his name, the original owner, or would you share with us your father's name?
My father was Harry Zelk, Herschel Leib. And I think his father was Chaim Mendel.
Thank you. What are we looking at here?
These are candles, Shabbos candlesticks that my father brought from Europe, and they're from 1870s.
And what is your name, please, and your father's name?
My name is Frida Langness. My father is Harry Zelk.
Thank you.
And we
What are we looking at here?
My birth certificate and my citizenship papers for America.
And your name and the dates appear
Yes, they're on
in the
there.
documents?
Yes.
Thank you. Who are the people in this photo?
Those are my parents, Harry Zelk, Sarah Zelk, and myself in the middle, Frida Langness. When it was taken in Danzig when I was, I don't know, sometime around a year old or so, or maybe 2 years old.
Can you give me an approximate year when it might have been taken?
Maybe in 37, 36 or 37.
Thank you.
and we
What is this?
This is a postcard from my father, Harry Zelk's store in Danzig, with his name and address on it.
Can you give us a time frame when this card is from?
Well, sometime like around 35, 36, 1935, 36.
And is this just for writing or is there a photo on the other side?
It's just for writing. It's just to write a message, a postcard.
Thank you. Please tell us about these photos.
These are photos from Trinidad when I was in dance class for ballet and tap. And the fourth from the left on one and sixth and from the left on the other.
Can you tell us which is which? The one on the left that's tall?
Yes.
Which one are you on?
Yes.
Which one are you?
Yeah, that's right. You're right.
Which one are you on the tall one? Are you fourth from the left or sixth from the left?
Fourth.
And can you give us your full name, please?
Frida Langness.
And do you know what year this was taken, approximately?
Well, probably in 1939 or 1940.
Thank you.
and we've got
Can you please tell us about these pictures?
These are photographs that my parents had taken of me in Trinidad, and I was about 4 years old, which would be 1939. Frida Langness.
Thank you.
Okay.
And who is this?
This is myself, Frida Langness, when I was about 8 years old in Detroit.
And what year do you think that would be?
Well, if I was born in 35, it would be 1943.
Thank you.
Okay.
And who are all of these people?
Well, these are all my family except maybe 1 or 2 people. But in the back row, there's Dima, Jacob, Natalie, Scott, Rachel, Erica, Leah, and then my son Michael, Harry, Max, Danielle, Alan. No, who's that? Dave, Alan, Lainey, Zach, Lainey, myself, Jessica, Jack, Charlie, Gabe, Emily, Lisa, Julia, and Susan. And Sarah's missing, and now Asher's been born since then.
Okay, and you said that you are.
Gary,
you are
oh,
in
I
the middle?
forgot Gary. Gary is here. Okay, my son Gary. He's on the end here. Okay.
Okay, and your full name?
Frida Langness. And
do you know when and where this was taken?
Yes, this was taken the summer of 2023 in Glen Arbor, Michigan, when we were all together at the homestead, which we go every year, but this was our largest group of people that's been together for a long time. So we did really well that we were almost completely there, except for Sarah wasn't there and Asher, who's born now. Brian.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Okay.
And this now concludes the interview.